Okay, welcome back everybody for the last session of this day retreat. I think we're all good. And so we'll sit together with in relative silence. I'll just say a few things and then we'll have an opportunity for one more Q&A session before we finish the day long. So just get yourself again comfortable wherever you are. Hopefully your body's been holding up. If you've managed to do the whole 4 sessions a day long, which is what it's intended to, and that the breaks of walking and standing can be helpful too. So just come back into the formal sitting posture once again. Lowering your eyelids or closing your eyes. And bringing some genuine interest into the practice, into looking into the nature of the mind itself. What's happening now? Are any of the hindrances present or absent? Noticing what's shifted, what's changed. And understanding that this is the very nature of the appearances that arise and cease within the mind. We're getting to know this mind. And a helpful way sometimes to settle into meditation at the beginning is by just keeping the mind's attention very open. You can start just by listening to the sounds in your environment, to the sound of my voice coming and going. Just let your awareness be very open and spacious. Recognizing and allowing everything, but not sticking, not grabbing hold of anything. What does it feel like in this moment just to be completely open to everything, but at the same time, very empty and spacious? This is the nature of the mind itself. Are you able to recognize that right now? At the deepest level, it's simply just the silent, empty awareness in me, talking to the silent, empty awareness in you. No difference. And everything else is just appearances and phenomena, empty phenomena. And there's nothing wrong with appearances and empty phenomena. But when we don't recognize them for what they are, then we're trapped in duality, confusion. So let them be. Let them come. Let them go. And start to deepen your wisdom understanding that they're not me, they're not mine, they're not a self. And they're not something that we can ultimately control. Because the nature of all phenomena is selfless and impermanent. So just rest the mind. Just rest with me in this empty, quiet space. And you don't have to even give that a name. At the deepest level, you know what this is. And all we're doing is becoming more and more familiar with it, getting to know it, trust it. and rest in it. Everything happens from there. But let go of any demands, desires, or expectations. And then peace will come looking for you. And wisdom. Don't get lost in thought, in imagination. Just keep waking up to when you're zoning out, running after ideas, and see how that keeps you trapped in personhood. This wakefulness is not a person. It transcends all those limitations that we impose on ourselves through conditioning. So come back to that, come back home to your natural state, and let the personhood dissolve. That's the only place that you'll find peace, contentment, and truth. The person you think you are is only in your imagination. Just let all of that go and be free. So for the last part of this meditation, I invite you all to turn your attention to sharing whatever merits that you have accumulated through this day of practice, of which there will be countless merits that you don't even know about. When you take up the intention to move in accordance with Dharma, to understand Dharma, innumerable forces and powers come to make profound changes in your life, to facilitate this waking up process. So we can feel a sense of gratitude and devotion to the Dharma. And gratitude for the masters who've walked the path before us and out of compassion have left so many teachings and pointers to help us come out of darkness. And we need to really recognize that, to reflect upon that regularly, and let that sense of gratitude and devotion grow in our hearts. And like they have done for us, so we should do for all beings, whatever merit, whatever peace, whatever goodness we have in our lives and have accumulated today. We turn the intention towards wishing that all beings may also come in contact with truth, with Dharma, so that they may come out of greed, hatred, and delusion, so that they may turn their minds towards virtue and wisdom. So just hold that intention in your mind, in your heart, and spread it towards those who are near to you, dear to you, without any sense of overt attachment, just wishing them well. May they be happy. May they find peace in their life. And then allowing this intention and feeling of metta, of loving kindness, to gradually spread outwards, to include all beings, human beings, animal beings, those that are seen and unseen. Utilize the power of your focus and concentration that you've developed today skillfully to stay focused on this wholesome intention. Recognizing that such wholesome thoughts and intentions and wishes has profound benefits for you and for all beings. Don't underestimate this. So, just putting the live chat on now, and Jitindriyā will come back to join me for the final Q&A of today. So well done to those who were able to stick with it. If you had the good
4 sessions.
If you had the good fortune to be able to do that, for those who could just do 1 or 2, you can always utilize this resource in the future, setting up a similar timetable and just using these sessions as a support, particularly if you can't get to retreats, day retreats. So just putting a whole day aside. You can even start early in the morning with the first session at 5 o'clock before breakfast, and then tuning into these 4 sessions as some sort of support to do that. So if there's any further questions, if there's still people alive out there in the chat room, let's see. There's someone alive and well.
They're popping in now.
Okay, so I'll start before we get too many questions. Okay, so Nia says, on the one hand, it feels like we are to transcend the experiencer or the person construct. But on the other hand, it feels like life is meant for experiencing. I feel conflicted on what to focus on at times. And I think there's a continuation of her question below, which is experiencing or just surrendering experiences. Do you have any wisdom for this dilemma? Thank you. Would you like to answer that one? Let's respond to that one. You don't have to.
Perhaps you don't need an agenda on this, but just to notice there are experiences. That is a large portion of our life, is experience. Experience we can define as experience of sense. Experiences always come through the senses. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, knowing, thinking, feeling, right? And it's not about avoiding these things or pushing them away, but the practices are really about recognizing what they are, recognizing their benefits, the drawbacks, their limitations, that ultimately these experiences, they come and go whether you want them to or not. That's their nature. So when we see with wisdom their nature, it releases the mind from suffering about experiences, because we want good experiences, we don't want bad experiences, we want to try and keep the good ones going and get rid of the bad ones, we fear the bad ones, we want more good ones. You know, that's a whole lot of suffering in the mind, whereas experience, if we see the true nature, it is just as it is. And we don't have to push it away. And in fact, to live a life where you have to make wise choices about how to proceed. We have this body, we have the faculty of speech, we have the faculty of mind, and we have a relational life, the relational field. We do have to make choices about how to respond and bring as much skillfulness into the relational field as possible, which brings benefit to oneself and others. And with wisdom, we learn to recognize what brings harm to oneself and others, what brings suffering, and so we refrain from that kind of activity. But as long as there is life, there is experience. Even once the mind is fully awakened, it still experiences life and the karma and has to make decisions about how to relate in the world. But for one who's fully awake, they've gone beyond greed, hatred, and delusion, so they don't act out of those things. There is wisdom and compassion leading the response. So it's not about, setting yourself up against trying to transcend experience or live it to the full. If that's the polarity or the dilemma you're setting yourself up in, but just notice, come to understand the very nature of experience itself, particularly in terms of its limitations. All experience, all phenomena, and that means all experience, is ephemeral. And if we have enough insight even into that, that insight will deepen into greater clarity. So this notion of transcendence, it's not about pushing anything away. It's actually a deepening of wisdom so that experiences no longer bring that second arrow of suffering. They are what they are. And we learn to choose to act with wisdom and compassion, ultimately. Okay, I hope that helps.
So Gwen is asking, any advice or tips for a beginner who has
no problem sitting still for meditation every day, but most of the time is distracted by thoughts? Thank you.
I thought that was a mistyping, because most beginners would have problems sitting still for meditation. So that's great. You're not a beginner. If you can sit still for meditation every day, that's advanced practice. No problem sitting still. But most of the time is distracted by thoughts. As I said in one of the meditations, so what? If there's thoughts, there's thoughts. Just notice that. But notice how, what the problem is that you don't want them. You want them to go. So then that can often set up a battle within that's like, well, this isn't how meditation is supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be thinking. I'm not supposed to be distracted. It's just what is. If you're distracted, you're distracted. But I guarantee you're not distracted by thoughts every second. There'll be times when there'll be gaps in between the thoughts. There'll be times when there'll be moments of peacefulness. But what we tend to do is focus on all the negative and say, well, I'm just distracted. But maybe only distracted for 70% of the time. If you notice that, it's not actually a distraction. So we go into meditation with no agenda, with no expectations. If thoughts are there, we notice them. But it's sounding like you're not really distracted by thoughts because you're noticing thoughts. So just notice, that's a thought, come back. So it is, the key to this really is patience and endurance, because a lot of people start out meditating thinking that they're just going to get blissful and peaceful. They've read something, heard something that meditation brings a lot of bliss and peace. And so they give up after a week, a couple of days. Maybe they'll go for a year, 2 years, and then they'll say, it's not for me, I can't do it. So we do have to actually be extremely patient and be willing to endure through the things that we don't like. But if we're expecting it's going to be this way and it doesn't meet my expectations, then we'll give up and we'll suffer in the process. So it doesn't matter if there's thoughts. Notice the distraction, keep coming back, keep going. Don't give up. That's my encouragement. Okay, so people just saying thank you, and M. Posh was able to come for all 4 sessions. Well done, you. So Colin's asking, thank you, Ayya. Hello from East Java in Indonesia. Wow. During one of the meditation sessions today, I was so relaxed and my mind was so content in the moment. Good. That's good, but if it's distracted too, that's good too. It was Ajahn Chah, so I don't want to set up that he had a better meditation than someone who was distracted. But the mind was peaceful and relaxed, and we recognize that, but we don't even attach to that. So, one of the teachers, Great Masters, says, good meditation, so-called bad meditation is good meditation. We learn something. Okay. Thank you from Chris. Colin, my mind was clearer and lighter than before with very minimal distraction from thoughts. It felt very nice and deep, that it was not easy to just snap out of this meditative state. Okay.
And the experience will change for everyone. Don't, yeah, that's the thing about just meeting each moment as it is, whether it's peaceful, pleasant, calm, or whether it feels restless and distracted. Our ability, we're cultivating this ability to meet each moment just as it is, and things will unfold in a good way.
So that's the second part of his, more of the question part of his experience.
So,
was this samadhi, or was I just in some sort of daydream like trance? I know for sure that I wasn't asleep. I was aware the entire time. How to tell the difference? Can you respond to that one? That's his second.
It sounds like a samadhi state, indeed. Not if there was awareness present, this is a qualifier. If there's a sense of awareness and lucidity, then this is samadhi.
Right, samadhi.
Yeah, good right concentration, good right samadhi. If a daydream-like trance, I mean, daydreaming, there's movement of mind, activity, just wandering, drifting. A trance-like state, often it may not have a crispness of awareness. So this is how you can tell the difference. But this is just in retrospect. You know for sure it wasn't sleep. I was aware the entire time. Then if there's awareness fully present, then that's definitely the mind in a samadhi. Now, samadhi is just the mind settling into a unified state. It's becoming defragged, less fragmented than our usual daily common experience. So this is more of a natural happening, and mindfulness is the precursor for samadhi. So creating this or practicing this continuity of mindfulness, the mind can find itself in these coherent samadhi states. So it's great. But if the ego gets involved and I want more of it, which it usually does because it's so pleasant, how can I hang on to this because it's so pleasant? Then it's stirring up the mud again. So just notice if these states come, they come. And like William Blake said, just don't cling to yourself, the joy, or you'll destroy the winged life, the winged life. Just kiss the joy as it flies, because these states will come and go dependent on what's being cultivated. So the presence and awareness is the most important thing. Very good.
Mesh is saying, grateful that I could be part of these 4 sessions. Immediately post-lunch, I was overcome by sleepiness. I found it hard to stay awake. Any tips? Yeah, that's when we experience the most sleepiness after lunch. The body's busy digesting, the heat of the day often. There's a few things you can do practically. You know, we asked you to come back and sit, and that may not be the best thing sometimes, but you can just do some walking meditation during those times, or standing. We didn't do any standing, but we could have. Keep the eyes open. But, you know, if you're really exhausted because, you know, you've got a busy life and this is the weekend and you just have a nap. You've got to make that call for yourself to know when
not in the middle of the meditation retreat.
No. Not unless, but also, yeah, and just look honestly, am I just being lazy or am I actually really tired and I need to have a rest? And if it's just laziness and dullness, just splash some water on your face, get up, pull your ears, and try to stay awake.
And just to say, I also felt really low energy after lunch. I was leading the session, and it was
fell asleep during it.
Didn't, but it was very warm here too. So I just stayed aware. You stay aware of this low energy. It's okay. It's not particularly pleasant, but it's okay. The body feels sleepy or tired, but just keep that gentle awareness and kindness going. Obviously, I stayed awake because I had to teach and hold the space. But, you know, if I was a participant, I may have drifted off a few times. But that's not necessarily a problem. We just wake up as soon as we can to just what's happening and accepting, opening, not trying to push it away. The mind has to get a little more subtle with sleepiness in terms of its mindfulness and awareness. And inquiry into this state can actually bring some more energy. Where do I feel this tiredness? What does it feel like? Can I breathe with it? This kind of gentle inquiry.
Want to read that one?
Would you recommend purposely feeling a hindrance, such as anxiety, and practicing meditating through it? One of Ajahn Chah's monks did that. I forget his name. Well, if anxiety arises and it's there, you have to practice with it, which is the best thing to do. In terms of purposely feeling a hindrance such as anxiety, I guess it means, okay, I'm going to think about a particular situation that caused anxiety and watch my mind.
Or go to the charnel grounds there.
Or go, yeah, right. The Thai monks would go
about.
to the cremation grounds. They had quite a cultural fear of ghosts in those places, and so it brings up a lot of fear or anxiety, and so you work with it. So that's something you can do. But just be very discerning about whether you decide to bring anxiety up on purpose or fear, and how you do that. Just be a little careful, depending on your history as well. I do have a guided meditation on working with anxiety in particular on the website in the Challenging Emotions series. But yes, you can purposely work with hindrances in that respect, but generally they're coming up so often, you don't necessarily have to go into a memory or project an idea of the future. You just start to recognize where they're appearing in everyday life or in our meditation. There can be little anxieties over all sorts of things, fears and aversions, desires. It can be quite subtle. So you can go either way, but just be careful if you're bringing something up purposely. Know your capacity and know the situation. Don't put yourself in danger.
Okay, so Anna's just thanks Anna and Deb. Could you expand on dullness? I think we just kind of talked about that with sleepiness and what to do. So we won't repeat that. Vic, has he enjoyed it? Thanks, Vic. Let's do it again with all these little yoga poses.
And you can do this again anytime.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, you can go through the whole day again as a retreat with others as well, if you want to do that.
Yeah, and use that routine, that program, and you can even listen to other recordings or guided meditations if you've heard too much of us.
Slip them in.
Kia ora from Berkeley in NZ. Jane. Oh, Giuseppe's been a distraction for Kanga. That's nice that you've got a little friend doing it. I'm sure the doggy hasn't been too much of a distraction, probably more of a joy. Oh, hang on, we keep missing stuff here. It pops down, doesn't it? Okay. So there's a question from someone in South Africa who's just joined now. Why does the concept of non-duality feel so scary? I do keep coming back, though. I guess it's scary because you're thinking about it as something, you're creating some sort of image, because the reality of non-duality is not scary, it's just reality. So I just have a look at what you've made this concept into. If it's simply because it's an ego response of not wanting to disappear into a non-dual state, maybe that's why. But it's interesting you say I keep coming back to it, because we, at the deepest level, we do seek truth, because we know truth at the deepest level, and we can't be fooled, fortunately, forever by appearances and duality and dualistic thinking. So your wiser self, your wise sage within, knows that it's pointing towards the truth. But just let go of concepts, because non-duality is not a concept. People make it into a concept. I mean, the amount of talking that people do about non-duality is unbelievable. But it misses the mark. So stop thinking about it, stop talking about it, perhaps even stop reading about it. Just recognize it. And when you recognize it, there's actually nothing to say. Okay? But if there's fear, it's about a concept, it's because you're conceptualizing it. So stop conceptualizing and just be. Be like Giuseppe, the dog.
Yeah.
Love the name. Giuseppe.
But non-duality actually means non-separation. It means not two. It's not a me and a you and an us and a them. There's not that conflict anymore of subject-object separation, isolation, egoic fear. So the actuality is it's the most peaceful, state that is without fear. So there's ultimately really is nothing to fear. It's one's coming into one's true nature.
Lovely. Okay, so from AF, thanks. From Kirk, sending merit your way. I'm content. I'm learning to deeply trust that which delivers skills to deal with thoughts, to prop my self-inquiry practice. Please be my community. Sweet. Well, I think we all are by default anyway, so it's kind of developed organically, naturally. So that's wonderful, Kirk. And you've been on the channel for a long time. I recognize you. Chris, just want to say thank you one more time. Channel is like a rock in my life that I lean on all the time. That's lovely.
Whenever I get lost and confused, lost in the mind and separate identity.
I think it continues here. So people can read that, and I'll read that.
There might be a question down.
There might be, and Jennifer enjoyed it. There are no words to express. That's lovely, Chris. You've been meditating for 20 years. Great. So Ben has a question. I know this world is like a dream, but I can't exactly act that way in society. But we all do anyway. I care about myself and others and the vast suffering, but I know it's only temporary. So I may come off as uncaring. Advice.
Like I said earlier to that question, what's the earlier question? About
the first one.
About transcendence and getting into conflict between transcendence and kind of everyday life or something. This is like also, respecting that we live a relational life. And yes, everything is like a dream. So from this perspective, from the meditator's perspective, when we examine appearances, it's like a dream because there's nothing really you can get a hold of. It's insubstantial. That's what the idea of it's illusory. We think it's more solid than it actually is. And the mind projects solidity and concreteness and reifies things and people and beings into something much more than it actually is. But when we see the truth of that, or even when we just hear teachings about that, it's not about becoming disassociated from people in the world because we project an idea that you're all a dream, you're all in my dream, or I'm dreaming you. This can happen, that practitioners kind of get into this. It's a bit of a subtle projection of notions, of conceptualizing, rather than just truly living your life as it emerges, but with this, from this place of kindness and compassion, refraining from harm and bringing benefit to beings. When we truly know how to or develop this capacity to be mindfully present and aware, these innate heart qualities of kindness, compassion, wisdom, equanimity, and joy just flow freely according to circumstance. And we learn to trust that more and more. So we actually see the preciousness of life and of beings, and actually feel their suffering more too. We see how beings, others and ourselves, get caught in the illusoriness of the dream when we think everything happening in my mind or the way the media presents things, is a real concrete fixed mechanism. Everything becomes more menacing in some way. Actually, when we learn to be present, things lose their supposed concreteness. And the only place left to respond in the moment is from this kindness and compassion. So in a way, your life becomes more rich and those who associate with you. So just encouraging you to contemplate this slightly different view. Where's that question gone?
Oh, it went up.
Oh, it went up. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if I spoke to that enough or properly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is only temporary, so I may come off as uncaring. Yeah, look, it's the word. It's almost I remember being in hospital after surgery and I wasn't recovering very well and feeling quite miserable. And the doctor said to me, well, at least, when he was doing his rounds, he said, at least, this will finish. It is temporary condition. But I felt like he was compassionate, but it didn't help to say that in the moment at that time. He was reminding me of what I really should know. But still, it's not always the right thing to apply, in words, saying this too will pass.
This will pass.
And yet sometimes that phrase, when you say it to yourself in the midst of a difficult experience, this too will pass, can be really helpful. So it just depends. Everything is relative. Everything depends. So that wise piece of wisdom isn't necessarily the right thing to say to someone all the time. We really have to be very sensitive and sense what's going to be supportive. Sometimes it's just being present and nodding and resonating with someone's suffering that actually helps relieve their burden in that moment, that little bit more, that sharing and connection. Okay.
So Tristan said, was helpful. It's been through a difficult time. It was a mess.
Yesterday was a mess. Today, super peaceful. Tomorrow, maybe a mess. Next day, maybe peaceful.
Doesn't matter, but that's great.
It's good.
You're learning,
to see that.
And you're learning how to create peace by letting go.
And the more wisdom comes when, one moment, oh, really messy. Next moment, oh, really peaceful. You see how fast the mind can change depending on the clarity and the view.
Okay, so thanks from Daniel for feedback, and Shah, I think it's Shah. Amy, your teaching have supported my delicate path of sobriety. Thank you. I look forward to future online retreats that you may offer and wonder if you ever offer private consultations. Generally, no, we don't do that, Amy. We're just offering what we're offering in this capacity for now. We do get a lot of requests for that, but we're just trying to keep it kind of simple and keep our own practice going. And if you're looking for some therapy, then it's good to have face-to-face anyway, I think, to wherever you are. Okay, so Colin's saying hi to the other dogs. Okay, here's a question on karma. How much of our past karma play a part in following the Dharma and finally falling off the ego identity? Is it karma and sankhara and conditioning which the mind carries from previous births to keep the ego going? Well, I think it's all past karma that plays the part, determines whether we come in contact with the Dharma, how we respond to the Dharma, and how we uphold the Dharma. We have this idea that we're just a beginning meditator. Someone said, I'm a beginning meditator. The likelihood is that you've been meditating for many lifetimes, and that's why you've come in contact again with the Dharma. So this notion of a me and this body and this life is this one life thing. It's very limiting, and we put limitations on ourselves. And no doubt the fact that we're all here together practicing, it means our karma is ripe to immerse ourselves in the Dharma and to keep going. So, and in terms of the other concepts of sankharas and conditionings, yes, they're what we've been talking about in this retreat. We didn't kind of mention the word sankhara in order to confuse people, but it's basically the conditioning process. And yes, that is what keeps us going, that continuation of believing in a me, in a self, in this body form. Okay, and you're very grateful to the Buddha's path and teachings. So exactly, that's so important to have. Okay, well, I think we have managed to come to the end of our questions.
Questions for the moment.
Which is good. So we might wind this retreat up a bit early. And one more question from Anne-Marie. Does Buddhism lay down the concept of sin? Are greed, hatred, delusion sins? I know killing and violence and the like are eschewed. Sin is a word that I heard within the Christian tradition, which is where we both grew up. But it was actually always, I think it was translated from ignorance, which is interesting. So the initial term was ignorance, and that's exactly what greed, hatred, and delusion are. The sin adds an extra sting and judgment to them. But when you think of the greed, hatred, and delusion as actions of ignorance which bring harm to self and others, then we just see it for what it is. And it's recognizing that violence and killing bring karmic consequences, and most of those consequences are consequences of suffering. So if you don't like the word sin, but the word sin is not generally used in Buddha Dharma. It's more ignorance to equate with that. Okay.
So Amanda was just acknowledging they gathered and practiced as a group.
Great.
Down in
Candelo.
Lovely.
It's good to know.
Glad you could stay with it for the whole day. And then sometimes being around people, mind jumps on potentials and starts silently realizing things about them and their lives. A lot of the time, those things can feel like invading privacy. I think you're acknowledging that the mind can become quite sensitive, particularly with meditation practice, and sometimes that sensitivity can border on or become more, becoming aware of other people's thoughts, but then it's like whose thought is whose thought, and the thought is just in the field. In the same way, in mindfulness practice, the Buddha says we contemplate the body and mind that arises here, one's own body mind, but we also contemplate the body mind of others in whatever way that appears. In the same way, these are impermanent, fleeting phenomena. Empty of self and insubstantial. So they're not to be taken as identity, whether self or others. Okay. So Since there's only one real self, what is Mara?
Delusion.
So Mara in the Buddhist tradition is a personification of delusion, that which wants to keep you bound in samsara, in the cycle of birth and death, that tries to keep you bound as the personification.
But Mara itself is also empty. So maybe, the questions keep coming. We thought we were getting off easy. And we thought we were getting an early mark, didn't we? Someone from Tassie. Sometimes I feel like I have no sympathy for people's troubles, yet I feel compassion. Is there a difference?
I think you just have to look into that one yourself. Do you sometimes feel compassion and then at other times have no sympathy? And that does it flip-flop? Or do you feel those things simultaneously? I'm not sure, but it's a nice little question for you to inquire into. I mean, compassion is a resonating with another's suffering and a wishing for their well-being. May they come out of that suffering. Sympathy, empathy for people's suffering can be similar, but it can just empathy, pure empathy, can sometimes miss the depth of compassion. Compassion is also the wish that they may be free, whether or not we can actually assist in that moment.
I think sometimes when we feel that lack of sympathy, it's often sometimes a coping mechanism too. We can harden our hearts to the world because it can feel too overwhelming. And, we're over it and we're sick of people's troubles because it's just... And so then this kind of lack of sympathy can be a way of protecting ourselves from feeling the pain, because if we open our hearts to feel the pain of other people, we do feel the pain, it can hurt. But so we've got to, real compassion is being willing to feel the pain of others and to stay with that. But as we've tried to encourage with the day, is not to take any of this personally, but not to push anything away. And then so your conflict or ambivalence that's coming through from no sympathy to compassion, it sounds to me like you do have compassion, but sometimes perhaps you just get a bit overwhelmed and need to shut things out. So just recognize that and know that when you really open your heart to compassion, it's okay if you feel the sadness and the suffering of others. And we learn that is a practice in itself in a lot of Buddhist circles, to breathe in other people's suffering and to breathe it out, to willingly take it on. And stay firm and open and compassionate in the midst of what we're seeing in the world. Okay. There's a question below from Jordan. When people are really affecting my life based on their own lack of I think you mean self-worth, ignorance
and fear,
I find it quite troublesome. Any advice for this total ultra compassion? You just answered. Okay. Yeah, I think I did just answer that. Yeah, cool. Do you want to answer, Reverend?
Yes, I've heard about using the elements as a mindfulness object. It seems like a really good basic practice. Mindfulness of the 5 elements: water, fire, metal, earth, wood. Is that a practice? In Buddhist practice, and I think I talked about it in the Buddhist series and certainly in some previous meditations, Buddhist practice, there's the 4 elements, the 5 or the 6. So the 4 is earth, water, fire, air, which is really the basic building blocks of physicality. We can contemplate the body in terms of earth, water, fire, air. And to that, we can add the element of space and the element of consciousness, which makes 6 elements altogether. I feel like I went through that in the Buddha Dharma series, but I may have skimmed it. Yes, it's a good meditation indeed.
Next question.
One student of the Christ stated that sin means falling short of the mark. Would that have a comparative in Buddha Dharma? I think it's more just being ignorant of reality for sin.
Not seeing the way things truly are.
Not seeing the way things truly are, missing the point, something like that.
Yeah. And it's good to change that word sin if it's just an unfortunate word that's crept into Christianity to make us all feel guilty. And it worked for me for a while.
It's our translations, isn't it? And then what we culturally add, the culture adds to the meaning.
And what you're made to feel as a child too, growing
guilt, basically.
Guilt. Okay. Any plans to visit Nam? I'm not sure where Nam is.
Unless they're saying
Vietnam? Could be Vietnam.
No
plans. We don't do plans.
Well,
too much.
We do plans.
Well, you do plans. You're doing plans. Those plans. I have a high sensitivity to energy. I am able to feel it. Oh, where'd he go? You're so sensitive. You've gone off the page. I have a high sensitivity to energy. I'm able to feel it from everyone and everything around me, even the plants. It's a lot. My question is, what can I eat without suffering? What can I eat
without suffering?
Oh, because you feel guilty for eating the plants. Is that what that means? Well, you could be an air. What are those people that live on air alone?
No, we're not encouraging that.
I'm joking.
Just to say that this is the realm of bodily existence in samsara.
This is the middle path.
You do just have to find what you feel comfortable eating. You can be a vegan, obviously, if you're feeling that sensitive, and maybe if you don't want to pick the plants yourself, obviously if that feels too painful, then obviously then one can find things to eat in the supermarket that are already picked. But you do have to find a way to survive. But you can share merits, share blessing at every meal. Share the merits and goodness of your life, and spread metta, bring the intention of kindness and compassion and share it with all beings every day. And that will help. I think that will help and guide you.
Okay, so we'll check it out on the website. Chris says, sometimes I feel like there's an active force trying to confuse, make me forget and push me from the path.
This is in relation to Mara, I think.
It feels like an entity. Is it fine just to allow it to be, or is there something I should do? Well, if you're really feeling it as an entity, you could just gently ask it to leave. Don't take it seriously, too seriously. Just, again, if it's hard to make comments with questions like this on a chat room, but I would just encourage you to, if you're really feeling it as a dark force, just to practice metta and see what happens. And don't get drawn into it if you're making too much out of it too. It could all just be in your imagination. And if it's causing you fear and suffering, yeah. Do you want to say something about that?
I just remember Tenzin Palmo said something really beautiful for experience she had when she was on retreat in the Himalayas, when she felt, kind of a negative energy around. And she was like, what do you think you're doing? I've got all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on my side. And she said she experienced this energy just disappear like that. So it's about, essentially that's like remembering your refuge. Take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, which is really, wisdom, truth, and goodness. take refuge in wisdom, truth, and goodness, and have a heart of compassion. And if you feel there's negative entities around, just reflect. You know, I'm in the stream of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. You know, and I dedicate my life to wisdom, truth, and goodness. If this can benefit you too, so be it. But, you know, otherwise, don't hang around.
Yeah, see you later. Radio Ear says, did the masters like Nisargadatta and Ramana Maharshi and the Buddha elevate to the same levels in self-realization and consciousness, or are there no levels in that regard? Thank you. Well, we're not really in a position to make those comments, but at the ultimate level, truth is truth. And, you know, the Buddha was said to have, he was a Samasan Buddha that had all the knowledges, but even he'd say, you know, what I'm teaching you is just like a handful of leaves, and the knowledge and wisdom he had was immense. So that's what made him a Buddha. And I wouldn't want to comment on Nisargadatta and Ramana Maharshi's levels, but, you know, they all saw the truth, and they were all free as far as we can tell. But it takes one to know one, they say. So we'll leave it at that. So maybe you can answer Luna's question. I have a question about the fourth precept. If we invest in the hindrances and khandhas, are we effectively lying to ourselves?
No. Because that's when there's investment in hindrances and khandhas, that's just based on the what should I say, the asavas and the ignorance in the mind that has just not yet been seen through, cleared up. So it's not lying to oneself, it's just not yet being able to see the sun through the clouds. So the precept on truth is literally just not to tell lies, to refrain from telling lies in speech. It's an actual thing about speech. But obviously, if you make that commitment in your life, even refraining from little white lies, it does bring a sense of integrity about, you know, just being truthful within yourself as well. But meditation practice encourages that. You can't hide from what's going on in the mind. You see the way things are. So it all kind of carries on. Yeah. Okay.
So I think we'll end it there. That's just Chris saying he's noticed the effects. So it's good. It's cool.
Yeah, great.
The Buddha didn't chain smoke or scream and throw things at people like Nisargadatta. Who knows? Maybe he did throw a few things. They just didn't record it down. We tend to idolize the Buddha because it's all written down in the suttas, but no one knows what he was like as a person.
But the interesting thing about that is each person still has their personality, their conditioned personality, even with the enlightened teachers, beings around the Buddha. They all had their different personalities, you know, and even in the suttas you can detect a little bit of chafing here and there, you know, between the old Mahakassapa and the young,
remember, he got fed up with the monks.
And when the Buddha got a little bit fed up,
he said,
the monks were just
I'm out of here.
So noisy, or they weren't listening to him and they were just squabbling with each other. Okay, I'm off. So everyone still has their personality. It's a karmic signature in a way. That's not to, you know, approve of Nisargadatta throwing things at people, but that was obviously part of his personality and the situation he was in, his Indian situation. And it's not for us to judge who's what and where, but just to say, don't expect that the personality
it's going to be
manifestation is going to be suddenly you're going to look like a perfect Buddha.
And a Buddha is just a statue anyway.
Okay, so we're coming up to the end of the day.
We are.
Do a bit of a brief review of what's on the screen. have any advice for people afraid of loneliness and are attached to a narcissistic relationship? When feeling the emotions stuck in the body, the words and the mind rationalizing often stop the emotion flow. Yeah, I think that was in response to something I said earlier. We're afraid of loneliness. Why? You maybe have to just look into that yourself. I mean, loneliness is an emotional state, and it's not pleasant, but it doesn't need to be the thing that keeps you in a relationship that's not healthy and not good for either of you. So there's lots of things within that, but you need to look within, and maybe even also, if you're in a situation, to find a counsellor or a therapist to help you maybe tease out some of the different things that are going on for you. But one little thing, this little kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but loneliness, if you break down the word, it can lead to aloneness. It doesn't have to be lonely, aloneness, but that can lead to all oneness. We can make this transition from loneliness to aloneness and all oneness, which is the sense of non-separation, intimate connection through realization of non-dual nature. But if you have to look into what that fear is around loneliness.
It's also a deep belief system that there's a separate me, separate from everybody else. And of course that gives rise to fear and loneliness when we believe and through that belief experience ourselves as a separate entity. But all these practices and all these teachings are trying to point us away from that sin of illusion, of ignorance, because we're not seeing things as they really are. So we come back to trying to turn our minds to truth, to Dharma, and we realize there's no one here to be lonely. There's no separate entities ultimately. The appearances are, and we acknowledge that. And we also acknowledge and feel the pain that comes up from loneliness. But the encouragement is not to get lost in it and believe it and drown it again and again. It's not to deny it or just make a superficial statement about it, even though it can sound like I am. But when we see the truth in our hearts, and by settling and practicing, then we really start to realize that that's not true, because you can never be alone. Everything is really part, as Ayya Jitindriyā said, of the whole. So keep developing your wisdom and understanding about the path.
And there's a bridge, as you were teaching earlier, a bridge to cultivate a metta practice, loving kindness or compassion practice. These are very connecting. Even if you're the only person in a particular country at the end of the world, if you do a practice based on loving kindness and compassion, sharing that with all beings, you will feel connected and in touch and not separate. It's a kind of a practice that leads to just what we were talking about. So try that as a bridge. Right, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Call it a day.
We've got to the end.
The one other thing, just to say, that if people would like to, particularly if you're in Australian time now, or if you're watching this, days after it's been recorded as part of your own structured day, and would like to continue into the evening to have some more sitting and reflections, and we put the links up on our website, and I think on these videos as well, to two talks, two meditations that keeping in tune, in alignment with how we've been talking. So there's one called Developing Samadhi by Ajahn Chah, and the other one is The Method of Developing Bhavana by Ajahn Doon. two great realized masters in the Thai forest tradition. And those links are there if you're going to go and have tea now and then want to continue into the evening. So that's just another resource. Or, you know, you might just want to sit in silence or listen to something else.
It can be really nice having done a day of practice, if you're in the situation where you can continue, bring your practice into the evening, transition into when it gets dark and before sleep, and things can really, because you have that the generation of the day's practice behind you, taking it into the evening can be very fruitful. So I'd encourage that for any of you where you can.
Good. Well, I think we hope that this day of meditation has been helpful, productive, helped you establish more an understanding of the path, and just given you a resource or a connection to Sangha, particularly if you are feeling alienated or isolated and don't have a sense of community. This is one of the reasons that we wanted to offer this, so that people can feel more of a connection and recognize that we are all connected. So may all the blessings come your way, and all the benefits of practicing truth and Dharma continue to deepen and blossom in your life. Would you like to say something, Ayya?
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. And even though you've done all these sessions, don't feel like you've done that and never revisit it again. Maybe in a couple of months, revisit
Do another
the
day
day
long
practice with these same videos, and I guarantee you'll hear different things
You will.
in them.
Yeah.
Do it once a year, although we might do a new one next year, who knows. But, you know, this isn't done and dusted. Come back. You know, every time you come back and listen to Dharma, you'll hear something new. So, yeah, thank you for joining us and making this possible from your end as well. May the Dharma grow in your hearts, and may peace be with all beings everywhere.
And I think we also, you know, I responded to most people, but also just to say thank you to all of those who sent such beautiful messages and sharings on the 𝐸𝐴𝐷𝐸 eulogy page, which was just really meant to be a notification, because I know a lot of people who've come to the live streams have met her, and I've exploited her in the past for videos. And so I thought I'd better let people know that she passed away. And then it ended up turning into quite a memorial page for her, which I'll leave up for some time, because there's some beautiful sharings and reflections and empathy, an outpouring of empathy. So thank you to everyone who had such compassionate responses. And, you know, this is what it's all about, isn't it? Really sharing that. And Ayya Jitindriyā wrote that beautiful reflection, and so much of it was about learning from something as painful as losing a loved one, whether it's a pet or a person. You know, the pain is still the same, but we always have to turn our minds to Dharma to understand it, so that we don't drown in these things like grief, loneliness, anger. We acknowledge them, but we're learning how to transcend them by understanding truth. So we're human at the one level, and we're divine at another. And can the two coexist? That is really the practice of the path. So until we see you again next time, take care, everybody, and may you all go well. And we send all our blessings to you. We do the blessings chant for you all later. So take care.
Bye for now.
And we're going to end the stream.